Okay, you still with me? Here we go. My last video, I ended with saying that we saw the diaspora after Titus's invasion, and many established themselves in communities throughout the Roman Empire, but we also see the establishment of Jewish communities in the neighboring empire, the Parthian Empire. You might be thinking, this is too much, I can't handle it, who's Parthia, what's going on? Now, we don't look at the Parthian Empire in this class. In terms of how the Western historians divide up the history of the world, Parthian then becomes part of what is studied for Asian art, or more specifically, the Middle East or South Asian art. Does that make sense? But that's ridiculous to confine it to just that and not incorporate it into the discussion of the Western world, because we know everything is interconnected. And so here is a map of the Parthian Empire. Parthian Empire takes over regions that were part of the Persian Empire and Alexander's Empire. And it's a neighbor of the Roman Empire. It's a neighbor of the Roman Empire with a lot of disputed territory. So here's another map. So edges of the Roman Empire will kind of blur with edges of the Parthian Empire. And this is where we are going to be focusing ourselves with our first official look of art. We're going to look at the city called Dura-Europos. You see it there? Now I've circled it on our map that we've been using for the Roman Empire, and you can see it's like just outside. Now, don't discount it that it's not got any kind of Roman influences, because I told you just now, this area is often a blurred border between the Roman and the Parthians. And the name Dura-Europos comes from, well, the general under Alexander. I know, you guys, your brains, this is how my brain works all the time, this constant kind of overlap. So the city of Dura-Europos. Dura comes from an Assyrian word meaning fortress, and we know that that area had been controlled by the Assyrians. And then Europos, it's the name of the hometown in Macedonia of Alexander's general Seleucus, who took over this area when Alexander died. Am I going too fast for you? Is this too crazy? Again, I apologize. This is how my brain works. So we're going to the city called Dura-Europos. The city was established after the death of Alexander the Great by his Macedonian general Seleucus. Okay? The city, as you can see in these two images here, this one is an aerial view of the current excavation site, and this is a drawing map of the city based on that archaeological record. The city is along a central trading vein, or series of trading outposts between the Romans and the Parthians, and it's located on the side of a river. You can see the river flows right there, and it has these natural high cliff rock formations along the river's edge that act as a really great natural barrier or form of protection. The other three sides of the city were closed in by these high walls, which would be totally normal at the time. You can see here in this one, and a little bit in this one, that the city was laid out in a grid pattern. Now, this is something that we see most often in Roman cities, and some Greek, but Roman cities, they love to put this kind of a systematic grid into their cities. And so we see these Roman influences like the grid pattern. We see these heavy defense walls using natural formations. And so I want you to think of this as both Parthian and Roman. There were many Roman troops stationed at the frontier who then would later live and establish themselves in Dura-Europa. And we're going to be looking at the site of Dura-Europa here. This is just showing you the expanse of the Parthians. Oh, because I want you to see how my brain works. Do you remember our statue of Augustus Prima Porta? And how on his breastplate there is the diplomatic victory of the Romans against their enemy, the Parthians? That's it! This is Parthian! Remember, the Parthian was giving back the Roman army's eagle standard as a sign of an agreement of peace. And Augustus was like, yeah, I dictated that. I'm the one who negotiated that. Parthians, the Parthian Empire. So they have this kind of love-hate relationship with the Romans. And in the middle of this, we're going to look at the city of Dura-Europa. Here, look at that. Here is that natural high rock formation along the river's edge that served as a barrier wall or defensive wall. And the other three sides, as you can see, many of the sites, city center has been lost to time. It was abandoned in about 256, 257, just because of changes in trade routes, economy, and power struggles. But you can still see the remains of the city walls and hints of the grid pattern city streets. We look at Dura-Europa for Jewish art because it is here that we see a very well-preserved synagogue and church house, or I should say house church, that were constructed during the time of Roman rule and help us to understand the larger context of art in late antiquity by the Jewish people or those of the Jewish faith. I know that some students are like, this is so stupid. Why aren't we in Jerusalem? That's their city center. The city of Jerusalem will offer many good examples, but not without additions, reworks, restorations that change or manipulate the late antiquity elements of the structures. Does that make sense? It's like looking at a house from 1950 that then got additions in 1960, 1970, it got a redo in 1980, it got a complete refurbishment in 1990, and then a new family moved in the 2000s and then redid the whole thing. That would be like looking at late antiquity structures in the city of Jerusalem. They're there, but they've changed so much. And so we look to Dura-Europos because the city was abandoned in the 200s and therefore has not had any modifications or changes to it. It's like finding a house from the 1950s that had been left and abandoned, and then we found it just now and we get to look inside and look through all of the stuff. Oh, goodness gracious. I'm giving you guys way too much of a glance into the way my mind works. Okay, so just to establish ourselves in Dura-Europos, this is the main city gate. It's right there. So here we are walking through the city gate. And here are the foundations of some of the buildings within the city structure. Think of this as a frontier town. It's on the western edge of the Parthian Empire, and it's got these hybrid cultures throughout its hundreds of years of occupation, right? It had the Greek, Macedonian, plus the Persian and the Mesopotamian gods. Like we see evidence of temples to Inanna here. We also see temples to Artemis. We have this hybrid Inanna Artemis. Her name was Azanana Kona. They had temples to Zeus. They had temples to Egyptian Roman gods. It was quite a cosmopolitan, right? Remember the word cosmopolitan from the Hellenistic? A city of the world, a city of the cosmos. Dura-Europa was one of those thriving frontier towns of a cosmopolitan. We're going to be looking at a Jewish synagogue from Dura-Europos in our next video.